What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. And this time I'm going to be covering Hannibal, the sequel to Silence of the Lambs. This movie is directed by Ridley Scott, co-written by David Mamet and Steve Zillian. Anthony Hopkins returns as Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Julianne Moore takes over the role as Clarice Starling as Made Famous by Jodie Foster. New additions also include Giancarlo Giannini as Inspector Pazzi, and uncredited Gary Oldman as Mason Verger, and Ray Liotta as Paul Krenner. Alright, so I'm going to make this review very brief because I really don't got much to say about Hannibal. It's a really rough movie in terms of story quality. It's really rough in terms of acting. It's solidly done. You know, every actor, you know, they do the best with the materials they're given, and they do pretty good jobs. You know, Julianne Moore is serviceable as Jodie Foster. Of course, no, Moore doesn't have the charisma of Jodie Foster, so her take on Clarice Starling is not as memorable as Foster's take. But you know, she does a good job. Moore is a good actress, and you know, she's taken over an Academy Award-winning role, and it just goes to show you that you just can't recast any old character with any old actor. You know, there's certain characters that need to be played by certain people because they just staple it. And Moore, she does okay. She does okay. You know, the character of Clarice Starling was very choppily written in this movie, which is based off the book of the same name. You know, Clarice's whole thing is that she's under scrutiny with the FBI because of a botched drug deal, and as an order of redemption, they're putting her back on the Lecter case, so to speak, because new information was revealed, which ties into the Mason Verger character played by Gary Oldman. You know, we get some of his backstory. We find out that Verger is a pedophilic child molester, and that he was also a victim of Lecter because, you know, Lecter pretty much, drugged Mason and pretty much persuaded him to cut off his face, which he did, and of course it, you know, left Verger permanently scarred. And the whole makeup of Mason Verger with the disfigured face looks pretty damn good. And I actually do like Gary Oldman in the movie. I thought Gary Oldman did a good job, and very chameleon in his portrayal, because you would never think this was Gary Oldman in the movie, even in the flashback. And then there's also they show flashbacks as to how Lecter and Verger meet, and you do see Gary Oldman in those flashbacks, but the flashbacks are so disoriented in the way they were shot. It was very stylized in the way it was shot, so that you can barely make out his face. And that's another thing about this movie, that everything in this movie visually looks great, but but when it comes to the violence, they're very over stylized and they're very over the top. And that's always been a main criticism for Hannibal, is that its violence is too over the top for its own good. Borderline cartoony. You know, with Verger carving off his face, the wild boars eating people, the infamous the brain dinner scene with Moore, Hopkins, and Liotta. You know, which is pretty much the most famous scene in the movie is the dinner scene where Hannibal's feeding Ray Liotta his own brain, which is ridiculously over the top and just, what the hell is this? Even though Ray Liotta's character comes across as a prick, I'm like, Jesus Christ, I wouldn't wish that my worst enemy at all. And, you know, Ray Liotta is a good actor, and, you know, he just pretty much played the character as it was written, and he did the best he could to make it good. So props to Ray Liotta, who's also a very good actor too. As usual, Anthony Hopkins puts in a great performance as Hannibal Lecter. And this movie overdoes Lecter a lot. He's more of a main focus, and nothing really interesting happens with him as the main focus, really. I mean, there's a large chunk of the movie where he's hiding out in Italy, and Inspector Pazzi is chasing him down, trying to collect a reward. Eventually, he kills Pazzi. But that's it. It's just really long and very drawn out, and nothing that Pazzi does is interesting. You know, because Pazzi comes across as a complete fucking scumbag, you know, doing whatever he can to get Lecter, to the point where he sacrifices a man's life just to get Lecter's fingerprints and money. So, you know, he's not doing it for a good deed, he's doing it for himself. And Pazzi's a cop. So yeah, Patsy comes across as extremely unlikable, and Lecter comes across as an anti-hero almost in this movie, which is, you see, that can work if Lecter is not the focus. He's just more like a consultant. When you put Lecter as the focus, you make him, he's borderline into that hero territory, which you don't want him to be, because his name is Hannibal the Cannibal. This is a guy who does horrific things to people. So yeah, that's also a big gripe. And like I said, the writing in this movie is really, really rough. I mean, like as I mentioned before, Clarice's overall story is not all that engaging. When you had the first Silence of the Lambs, all right, the first movie, which is an investigation movie, pretty much. And this movie is pretty much a to catch a criminal movie. Or like a chase movie, pretty much. It's a chase movie. It's not, instead of being an investigation movie, it's a let's chase this guy and see if we can catch him. And the investigating part is pretty much ignored or just glossed over. Like, Khalees doesn't do a whole lot of investigating, in my opinion. She just does a lot of sitting down, somewhat investigates, and then sits down again, then has conversations and sits down again. Not a lot happens in this thing. So, yeah. I mean, again, Hannibal, it's serviceable. It's not all that memorable. I know a lot of people like it. A lot of people don't like it. I've always been indifferent to it. I don't hate it. At the same time, I'm not going to go out. I won't go crazy if I don't watch it again. And I've seen Hannibal multiple times. And it does have some good things in it that don't make it a bad movie. Because, Hannibal, overall, it's not a bad movie. It's a serviceable movie. Is it as good as Silence and Manhunter? Hell no. But to me, Hannibal, it's a solid 6.5 out of 10. It's serviceable. It's watchable. It's a good way to kill 2 hours. But other than that, it doesn't really have much in terms of character progressions. It's very, very limited. In terms of engaging story, it's relatively just there. And everything else in it is just a lot of filler. And that's all I got to say. Anyway, yeah, so 6.5 out of 10 for Hannibal. Like, comment, and subscribe to this channel and video. Also, if you like professional wrestling, subscribe to my other channel, for which I'll provide a link for in the description box below. Thank you and goodbye.